Let's talk about people who do have an idea, a, a big idea that they want to launch in a very entrepreneurial sort of way. I know that Middle Turtle started out as a big idea. In your own experience and advice that you would give to others, how do you start leaning into making the big idea more than an idea, but in a way that doesn't make you risk everything you have?
Right, absolutely. It's important to, this depends a bit on your life situation, like the opportunity costs that you individually face in that moment, right? So for me, starting this business in my mid late 30s, there are some ways in which I can be more bold and risky, risk taking. And there are some ways where I'm constrained, right, in terms of time or money and obligations that I'm very happy to have, but it's just a phase of life thing. So it depends a bit on the situation, but regardless of your individual situation, um, think back to that idea of entrepreneurship as testing a bundle of hypotheses, right? It's not just one big idea, it's a series of ideas that interact with one another in interesting and important ways and can individually be tested, right? So, one way to reduce risk is to identify those smaller ideas that add up to the big idea and test them individually. So
Okay.
here again, I have to acknowledge one of my mentors, Tyler Rye, I was his teaching assistant for many years at Wharton, and kind of got this drilled into my head. And many of the entrepreneurs who would come through our classes would have stories of doing this really effectively. Is that if it feels risky, you need to find ways of testing assumptions in your model without taking on the full risk that comes with. I mean, I can't tell you when you start a company how many different administrative and legal and accounting things. It's just an absolute nightmare, right? So what's important is to test those ideas, and many times you'll get feedback on the idea where the company you end up starting, there's a like abstract conceptual core that is related to your original idea, but the manifestation of it in the company is totally different. And
Hmm.
it's, if you can get some of that learning and pain out of the way before you take the leap and start having that clock ticking in your head or your financial runway burning up, it tends to go much better.
You mentioned that you heard lots of stories about how people unpacked these conglomeration of ideas to be able to test one hypothesis or one small idea at a time. Can you recall any of those specific stories to give us an example, a concrete example of testing a singular hypothesis that's part of a grander idea?
Yeah, absolutely. So I can actually probably most concretely speak to Middle Turtle's own journey as a company as an example of the broader um, point. And for me, I started this company in 2023, and that was a really interesting time to start a company because of the emergence of these AI tools. And we're still learning what all the effects are, for better or worse, of those. But I think what for Middle Turtle, it really shook things up in terms of certain things becoming viable that may not have been viable before as an entrepreneur, and then certain ideas for the business no longer being viable or at least no longer necessary. So the original concept for Middle Turtle was sort of an information platform for careers and social impact. And that's an example of an idea for a business that may have actually worked at a certain time in a certain place, but with emergence of these tools, probably is less viable. So there, what's changing is the time and the external environment, where these AI tools over time will be able to provide a lot of information that that platform would have provided. In fact, the AI tools would have gobbled up that information probably, and regurgitated it as its own. So that is freeing in a way, because you can trust that certain types of information are easier to find than they were a year or two ago. But as an entrepreneur, I also have to focus on the opportunity that comes with that, or what gaps are remaining, where in a world where you imagine someone has perfect information at their fingertips, what's still missing?
Mm.
And thankfully for my business, at least I think, what's really essential and still missing from interacting with AI tools and from situations where you have a lot of information at your fingertips is that social component, where you're testing hypotheses, you're getting moral support, and so on in a community that is not possible to recreate through technology alone. So that's
Yeah.
what we focus on.
I love my chat or my Claude or my whatever AI tool I'm using as a thought partner, but it is
Yeah.
not the same as a community of real brainstormers and listeners and conversationalists. Yeah, it's we're still not there, are we?